What NSFW fact did you learn at an embarrassingly late age? I'm late to the party with this, but this is an embarrassing case of bad women's anatomy, made worse by the fact that I am woman. A couple of weeks ago I learned that when pregnant women are told in labor things like you are 7 centimeters dilated, I thought that they were literally talking about the vagina rather than the cervix. In my mind, the vagina literally just became a huge 10 centimeters open black hole into the body. I only learned a few weeks ago that it is the cervix they are talking about. Did I also mention that I am nearly 5 months pregnant? I guess it wasn't a necessarily late age, but I was telling a whole group of horrified friends in high school about how I was eating out my cousin for doing something, only to later be told the difference between eating out and chewing out. Eating a girl out doesn't mean taking her for dinner. In middle school I wasn't uninterested in the opposite sex. Surprise, I'm gay. Or anything sexual. My friend told me women could have multiple orgasms at once, and my only reaction was that sucks, not knowing what an orgasm was. When I was a sophomore in high school I was awkward and regularly picked on. I thought I was super cool wearing LA Looks hair gel to style my hair with the duck butt. The stuff often dried and peeled and left white chunks in the hair if you touched it too much. So at the lunch table this girl goes, "It looks like you have jizz in your hair," and I didn't know what that word was, so I just said yeah I do, and then nobody talked to me the rest of the day. When I was in high school, my parents, my best friend and I were going somewhere. Parents in the front seat, me and my buddy in the back. While we were driving, my folks were listening to some oldies on the radio. There was an interview with the lead singer of and the Mysterians. In the interview, he said the song 96 Tears was originally called 69 Tears, but they changed the name because they knew the song wouldn't get any airplay with the original title. Me, I don't understand why it wouldn't get played on the radio. 96, 69. They are just numbers. Awkward pause. My best friend leaned into the front seat and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Groovy Brent, I've got this one." Later that day he explained what I had just asked my parents. My buddy thought the penis went into the clitoris at the age of 19. That being circumcised didn't mean the head of your DCK gets chopped off. I was too old when I found that out. I thought being a bottom was when the guy was on the bottom of the girl. Only realized when someone jokingly asked if I was a power bottom. And I said, "Oh yeah." They never let that one go. For whatever reason, I grew up thinking that men were supposed to have 3 testicles. I was a 13-year-old boy before learning the truth. I thought I was deformed. Or maybe my third ball just hadn't developed yet somehow. I'm not really sure what I was thinking. I just remember the absolute embarrassment I felt when one of my friends found out about this misunderstanding. Ladies have 3 holes in their bottom half. I had to break it to my 27-year-old friend that she doesn't pee from her clit. I'm an RN and I told a patient I needed her to put a tampon in before we collected her urine sample, because she had vaginal bleeding. She looked at me like I was an absolute idiot and said, "You can't do that. If you put the tampon in, how can the pee get out?" Mind you, this was a 25-year-old woman who also had 2 daughters. It took about 10 minutes of explaining for her to understand that you don't pee out of your vagina. I still don't think she believed me. Apparently, Netflix and chill has a slang meaning I didn't know it had. While getting my hair cut the other day, by a 20-something hairstylist, the conversation turned to what we were doing that weekend. Not having a lot going on that evening, I told her I wasn't doing much. She said the same. She said she was just going to sit at home that evening and relax. So I said, "Oh, Netflix and chill?" The look on her face told me. Immediately, I had put my foot in my mouth. I simply smiled at her innocently. After a few awkward moments she said, "You don't know what that means, do you?" I confessed that I didn't. Like trying to explain something to her clueless grandfather, she made me aware of the subtext meaning. "So, That was an uncomfortable haircut. A girl I know at school, high school, thought that penises had bones in them. Human ones don't. Not me, but I had a rather frustrating conversation with someone in high school on the bus about foreskins. He couldn't fathom how someone could be uncircumcised because, and I quote, "How could you even pee then? The foreskin covered the entire penis at birth and you had to be circumcised so you could pee." What a wet dream is. I remember in school being taught, but not knowing what it was. I even remember answering the question on a sex ed TED. Wet dreams are also referred to as nocturnal emissions. Blah blah blah. But I had no idea what they were talking about. I always thought a wet dream meant you peed yourself. Oh, you mean sheet sneezes? Not me. But I had a friend who basically explained that he didn't know that if you had a vagina you still had a urethra. I think he was in high school before he learned otherwise. He just thought that the labia essentially acted as floodgates, and when you needed to pee they would open like a trapdoor and your urine would just fall out. I still laugh about this. Not me, but an old roommate of mine. He comes in and asks me if my husband and I were gonna have sex that night. I told him probably not because my husband got home late. He then asks me if his girlfriend can have one of my birth control pills because they didn't have any condoms. I told him no because I have to take it. He asks me why because I said my husband and I weren't gonna do anything. I told him you have to take it at the same time every day for it to work. He looked at me like an idiot, and that was the day I had to explain birth control to my 23-year-old roommate. I didn't learn what a clitoris was until I read The Color Purple 3 years after my supposed health class in high school. And that I even have a clitoris. Edit. There's more than one size of condom. A proud micro tiny. Registered sign. User myself. That there's movement involved in PIV sex rather than just insertion and laying there. Haha, back in middle school I used to think sex meant touching the penis to the vagina. The thought of insertion or in-out motion hadn't even occurred to me. The difference between vulva, labia and clitoris. My brother went the first 22 years of his life thinking that every woman in the entire world got their period during the last week of the month. Like some kind of demonic clockwork. I was like 22, now 26, when my boyfriend said something about finding my pee hole. I thought I had been peeing out of my vagina. I used to think that every time I had to pee on my period I had to remove my tampon. Edit. I guess I probably knew there were two separate holes. But y'all, I swear it felt and still feels the same to me. My girlfriend in high school once rubbed my DCK over my pants in my truck before a movie. When we talked about how that was later in the evening, she said that was my first hand job. She honestly thought that was a hand job. I very recently discovered that the clitoris is outside of the vagina. My first girlfriend never learned where it was, so I didn't think anything of it. My current girlfriend, when we started having sex, she said don't forget the clit, and I went, what? The clitoris is outside the vagina, but the majority of it is actually internal. The outside part, the glands, is just the easiest to access. I had a general idea about sex from a very young age but didn't officially understand the mechanics of intercourse until I was a young teen after I asked, embarrassingly loud, in class what a boner was. Women wipe themselves with TP after going pee. Was in my mid-20s when I found that out. I hope you're a guy. You can suck and lick anything as long as you wash it off first. I used to be grossed out by oral sex because you either literally PSS with those organs or come close to it. In elementary school, a friend and I were talking about what we knew about sex, trying to guess what the bases were. We both agreed put things in your mouth was the last base. Because it's so gross. So, you're not alone. My male housemate in college, who was 21 at the time and not a virgin, totally didn't believe me when conversation led to my telling him that girls don't pee out of the same hole the penis goes in. He had to go down to his room and Google it, and then we never spoke of it again. I was raised Catholic. I used to think the sex of the wedding night was so ingrained in the sacrament of marriage that the copulation occurred in some room in the church. I may have even thought the altar at some point, but I think I realized that at least was silly at an early age. That girls can masturbate too. I learned this at almost 14. I'm female. Edit. Met a girl in college who didn't know guys' balls move with temperature. They are like our own personal lava lamp. Thanks to some subpar sex ed, my first boyfriend thought HIV spontaneously generates when two guys have sex. We went to get tested for HIV after we ducked for the first time, even though we were both virgins before. That you can't get pregnant from giving someone a blowjob. There are better things than workshop carpet to rub your DCK against. Not me, but a friend of mine. He was 22 when I slapped him with the fact that women give birth from the vagina. He thought women give birth from the belly button. I just learned from my wife today that women are born with all the eggs they will ever produce in their life. I'm 28. Edit. Apparently there is some relatively recent science that would indicate that women can make new egg cells with stem cells, but how much this contributes is unclear. I'm uncircumcised and it took me way too long to understand that my penis was different than most guys, since here in the US, circumcision is more popular. Age: 22 women have to wipe after peeing. I thought they just wiggled on the seat or something. It was before leaving for date with an ex and she said I gotta pee right quick. A minute later she yells for TP. I say I gotcha but thought you just needed to pee. Her yeah I'm done. I need to wipe. It was then I realized. I asked my parents what a BJ and a lesbian were at the same time. I was told one is a woman who loves women and the other a department store. I thought fellatio was a type of ice cream. Always wear a hard hat when entering the job site. I didn't know what an orgasm was until I was about 14. Until that point I was completely stumped as to why people liked sex. Not to touch the head of a guy's DCK right after he's orgasmed. Sorry, dude. Edit. I get it. Some people are into that. But this particular fellow wasn't. I like being bitten, smacked, having my hair pulled, but some women will flip their shitty on you if you just do it out of nowhere. Don't worry about it. I thought I was that small percent of women who couldn't orgasm. Finally, I can. My boyfriend, 22, was feeling up my boobs and comes out with funny to think that boobs are just full of milk. Semicolon. Like. He thought boobs always had milk in them, regardless of if a woman is pregnant breastfeeding. Semicolon. No. How to pee using a urinal. I just never learned how to do it. I always used the stalls and would lower my pants and pull down my underwear. Then one day, I went to the beach and really had to pee. For some reason I didn't want to go in the ocean. I think we were leaving. And I went to the bathroom. Turns out there were no stalls but I really had to go. So I took my 18-year-old self to the urinal and just figured it out. It was a good day. Hope you didn't pull down your underwear. I'm in my 30s and gay and, until a few years ago, I had no idea that semen came back out of the vagina after sex. I thought it just stayed up there. Not me, but the other guy. I had a vasectomy after my son was born at my age 28. It was sort of common knowledge thereafter around the office that I had done this. And that also 2 years later my had wife left me and our preschool age kids, which was really for the best. I was a single dad. The following exchange happened when my son was around 10. A 20-something male coworker came up to me one day and asked, "You still have sex? Right?" My answer was my girlfriend wouldn't have it any other way. Laughing. Then he asked, "Since you've had that vasectomy, After you have sex, what comes out? With a straight face I gave him my best answer. Sand. What labia majora are? I'd just been thinking of them as vagina cavity skin, I guess. When someone said labia, I only ever thought of what I now know are labia minora. Duck in A. It's like when someone gives you a birthday present in a bag. The labia majora are the bag, and the labia minora are the tissue paper inside hiding the present. Sometimes there's lots of tissue. Sometimes there's just a little. Sometimes it sticks out of the bag. Sometimes it's stuffed down inside. Sometimes it's hanging out on just one end. I had to be probably 17 or so when I learned that girls don't grow a vagina when they hit puberty. I had babysat girls and changed their diapers before, but I didn't look at their business. That's why I was always so confused when you heard about people doing bad things with underage girls. I thought if they hadn't hit puberty, then there's no vagina, so then what do they do? TL. I didn't learn until sophomore year of high school that oral sex was not just another name for making out. I went until I was 22 not knowing what an uncircumcised penis looks like. I thought that was really bad, but my GF was 24 when she found out, so that made me feel slightly better. I was unaware of what cleavage was until I was 13. You see, when an sigma bond is hit by ultraviolet radiation. What ménage à trois meant. I was like 35 before I found out what it meant. I was cooking dinner for two ladies one evening. They came over to the stove while I was cooking and one said ménage à trois. Being the dumbass that I was, I told her sorry, I don't know any French recipes. They looked at me and laughed at me. We then ate the dinner I cooked and they soon left my place. I then dialed up my 2400 baud modem and connected to the infant internet and found out just how much of a dumbass I was. That girls wipe their lady parts with toilet paper after they pee, and women should always wipe front to back after pooping. That pee is stored in the balls. I was 17 when I learned that menstrual fluid is actually blood. Worse, I'm female and had been having periods for 3 years and still thought it wasn't blood. To be fair, this was pre-internet, so I couldn't just look it up. You can't get pregnant if you dry hump with clothes on. I was told at school that you could. I didn't know this until I was 19. Edit. Good to know. My highest upvoted comment was about thinking you could get pregnant through dry humping. Not me. But girl I used to be with didn't know anything about a clitoris. Like she never knew it even existed. She was 28 at the time. I was 20 when I learned that an orgy was a group duck and not another word for orgasm as I had always assumed. Also 20 I learned that blue waffle was not a real STD. 21 when I learned that face duck meant oral, and not a heavy makeout sesh. Penis doesn't actually get rock hard. Depends. But they definitely can get pretty damn hard. Friend of ours were trying for a baby with no luck. Jane mentioned, at a dinner party, that Trevor was trying really hard. So we all made the normal jokes. It suddenly became apparent that they were not having sex. We never leaned what they were doing instead. But they were not doing it right. 9 months later they had a baby. A blowjob is, in fact, not when your partner blows on your DCK like hot soup. First one was very disappointing, to put it lightly. My friend thought bust a nut meant pop a cat. Took a couple times of him saying I'm gonna bust a nut in yo ass to our friends before someone had the heart to tell him that tigers and female lions. Why would that be NSFW, you ask? I said it at work and it basically undermined all potential prospects of getting anywhere at said company. Would not recommend. I literally just found out morning wood is actually a sign of good health, and not getting it could be pointing towards ED. Sloping towards ED. What a muff was. In the UK it's a woman's pubes. I always thought it was what you called the fluffy bit on the end of a microphone. I discovered this when I shouted it out in class at some point. Edit. Just looked up what it is actually called and it's a muffler. So I guess that shortens to muff. I thought that erections just stuck straight out, like perpendicular to the rest of the body. So I had some serious confusion about how some SX positions could possibly be comfortable. In fact, I once had a SX dream that involved using a protractor to get the angle right. Masturbation and menstruation are not the same thing. I had to explain SX ed to my college roommate who was having SX with the 40-year-old pizza delivery guy. Unprotected, I had to explain pregnancy, birth control, the process, everything. She thought I was crazy. Not really NSFW, but I didn't know that flipping your zipper down made the little ridge lock your zipper in place till I was 30. I was walking around selling hot dogs up until 7 years ago. My best friend and I are women in our 30s. She is a single mother with a 5-year-old boy. At work one day we were talking about kids and she mentioned that lately her son is being lazy about wiping his penis after he pees and she doesn't know how to correct it. I just kind of sat there with a blank face for a moment and our co-worker slowly turned around and said, "What?" She did not believe me when I told her that guys don't wipe their penis. I had to call my husband and put him on speakerphone to tell her. With a horrified look she said, "You mean every time I go down on a guy, there could be pee on his DCK?" All that endless and effortless PRN can really duck you up. You get desensitized to real women. You get so many dopamine rushes from it that you can down-regulate your dopamine receptors. This leads to inattention and low arousal in normal situations. You end up needing more and more extreme things to get you off. I remember in my preteen days before I was exposed to PRN, I would masturbate to the memory of a girl telling me about her awesome hobbies. Now I need to find the perfect video that hits all the fetishes I'm into to get off. It wasn't until my late teens that I learned that a boner wasn't when a guy's pee curves backwards and goes up his own butthole. What? I was about 16 when I learned that a man's penis grows with blood and wasn't retractable into his body like an animal's penis. That if you keep sucking after a guy comes they squirm or scream for some weird ducking reason. It's hilarious. You can also end up with a husband from this, so be super careful with who you do it to. Me shopping around at a hippie store at age 20. Sees book. Also me. Reads title of the book. Me again. That girls don't jizz like men. That a devil's triangle is a drinking game. A friend didn't know that busting a nut didn't mean the same thing as busting balls. He thought somebody was messing with him and he said. My German teacher in school called one of my classmates a DLDO instead of a dodo. I didn't know what a DLDO was and was too embarrassed to ask my friends what was so funny, so I just laughed along with them. I then asked my ma'am what a DLDO was over dinner. I want to die thinking about it. When I was in middle school I knew when you had SX. It was naked kissing. And that's it. I knew vaginas and I knew penises. And I knew mine got hard. I thought. During SX. Until like 7th grade. Men had to wear underwear or jeans during SX because you wouldn't want your wiener going inside of her. Then in 8th grade one watched PRN and I realized. That's the entire point.